What's up, YouTube? Brad Hoover from Rants. Alright, so this is going to be our Shang-Chi Legend of the Ten Rings review here on Rants. Like I've said a million times before about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, really doesn't matter how good this movie is. Could have been the best movie ever. Doesn't really matter because China isn't going to show it. And so all that box office success that the MCU has known, this is going to feel like a flop. And that's kind of a sad, it's really sad in a lot of ways, especially after watching this movie, that, it's not going to get that backing, it's not going to get the recognition maybe it deserves. I was pleasantly surprised with it. It was a decent movie. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. It's not a Black Widow. It is a decent movie all the way through. Where I felt like this movie failed in a lot of ways, and I felt like every MCU movie, all of Phase 4, has failed, is there isn't that overarching villain that's just standing in the shadows, that people are fearful of, or that we're excited to see, even in the end credit scenes, which was just a staple of what people enjoyed about the MCU. We hung around for the end credit scenes. It's talked about all over YouTube and all over these news sites. The end credit scene. Well, there's no end credit scene that really stands out anymore. Whether it be series or whether it be movies anymore, and that's kind of bad. The MCU, and I did not realize how much they needed Thanos. But they need a Thanos-like character. They really do. And I feel like this whole phase is going to be just a complete and total disaster if they don't find that in a lot of ways. And maybe, with the Loki series, we were able maybe to kind of get a glimpse of somebody that could be that overarching figure, but doesn't show up. So, and it's not hinted at as an overarching threat. So, I mean, there's not that person that is needed. But as far as the protagonist goes of this movie, Simu Liu did a really good job. And I mean a really, really good job. He is the protagonist that we needed. He was, I would almost say, like take Black Widow film, for instance. Black Widow was a character we know, that we knew, that we loved, all the way back in her Avengers day. But in that movie, she took a back seat to a lot of other characters, and then sometimes she just didn't even feel like the protagonist at all. This doesn't work that way. Simu Liu is clearly the protagonist that is needed. And I'll admit, I thought when his sister appeared, I thought, okay, this is going to be like the little bait and switch that they're going to do. He's going to have his name plastered all over, the theaters and things like that. But it's really going to be her that's going to be the main hero. No, it didn't work that way. He is the main guy. And I thought this movie needed that. I thought that made this movie more enjoyable. That it didn't have all that woke garbage that you expect from MCU now. It felt like just a really fun popcorn flick in a lot of ways. The fight scenes that Simu Liu does in this are great. They're great in a lot of ways on his part. Let me just put it that way. There is some action sequences that kind of bothered me because it felt like a Chinese martial arts film where they have like this. You can tell that it's when they're doing their jumping that there's a string pulling them up. There was a lot of that in this film, and it kind of bothered me. If it was just a normal martial arts film, probably wouldn't have cared. Probably wouldn't even have thought twice about it. But this being an MCU film, it felt like they could have done a little bit better in that regard. But I will say the bus fight scene was by far the best fight scene of the entire film. It was the one that it felt more authentic. It felt like, okay, there was none of that, strings pulling people up in the air and doing like crazy wild things. It was just like a really cool, like Jackie Chan like fight scene, where he's just, doing crazy things, but it's things that you could see him actually do. It's not something that's just completely and totally out there and far-fetched feeling. It felt authentic in a lot of ways. His fights with Razor Fist was really good. I thought Razor Fist was going to be like one of those, those stepping stone like villains, where he's that big baddie that the protagonist meets, and then just after like a little bit of a fight, then the protagonist just beats him up, and he's just basically a nothing. Didn't really work that way. Razor Fist actually held his own with Shang-Chi, and I really thought that part actually worked for me because it didn't feel like Shang-Chi was just, okay, next level strong. He struggled. He needed help sometimes. That worked for him. That really, truly worked for him. That is where I feel like the MCU sometimes screws it up with like Captain Marvel, where that they're just next level strong, and it just doesn't feel real. Really doesn't feel real, because some movies they'll be like extra strong, and then other movies like take Endgame with Captain Marvel, she just felt like nobody in a lot of ways. She wasn't as powerful as Thanos. That was where this movie just does perfect on it. As far as Aquafina, she did really good. She was really funny. She really brought in the MCU humor that was really missed, I felt like, in Black Widow. Black Widow had some like egregious humor, and it just would completely and totally ruin what would have been powerful moments. Aquafina did not do this in this movie. She was like, she hit her marks. She was the comic relief that this movie needed, big time. And she, I felt like she stepped up. I kept thinking, okay, there's going to be this moment where she's just going to completely and totally just ruin a really powerful scene through like some kind of weird comedy. No, she didn't. She powerful scenes that were meant to be powerful were powerful. Comical scenes were funny. I actually laughed a couple of times in this movie, and it was mostly because of Aquafina. Simu Liu and Aquafina, playing their parts. They had that karaoke moment that just, I don't know, it cemented who these characters were. They're just a bunch of nobodies. They were valets, and yet they rose to the occasion. This was the typical hero rising from the ashes to, or rising from nothing into something great. And I'm not saying that in a bad thing. That's the way humans really like their antagonists to be. They like it to come from a place that they can relate to, and then grow into something that is just out of this world. And that's what we get with Simu Liu. And Aquafina helped him in a lot of those ways. And I thought it was just great all the way around. Now, as far as Mandarin is concerned, the father-son scenes were very good. Made this movie in a lot of ways. Maybe if there was one complaint that I could say about it, is they should have maybe ramped it up a little bit more. Yes, we got to see like some of the horrors that the Mandarin actually was capable of. But then there was some like scenes. Like there was this one scene where, he's like, oh, my son, and you're going to take, over my place and all that. And then we're going to go back and we're going to burn Ta Lo, or however you say that name, of his mother's village because they're holding her hostage. And then Shang-Chi's like, no, we're not going to go and just murder an entire village. And he's like, throw him in the dungeon. And I'm like, you were just eating dinner with him just a moment ago, and he's just like, no, we're not going to do this. And like, literally, you say nothing but just throw him in the dungeon. What was your plan from that point on? Like, that made no sense whatsoever. And I kept thinking, oh, this is going to be like some master plan where they're going to go into the dungeons. They're going to find being Kingsley with that little creature. I don't even know what it's called. A magical creature. And then he's going to lead them to, Talo. Well, and it was all going to be like some master plan. It wasn't a master plan. There was no master plan to it. It was just like, oh, you went against me, I'm throwing you in the dungeon. And then I'm going to make you, the new me. Like that, it just didn't feel right. That seemed kind of ruined a lot of the second part of it, the second act, in a lot of different ways. But overall, I mean, I enjoyed the Mandarin. He's this grieving father. He's another character that you can truly relate to. He's lost his wife, the love of his life. And he kind of, to a certain extent, kind of holds it, I think, against his son because he felt like his son didn't do enough to prevent it. But his son was just like 7, and that kind of threw me off a little bit that he expected that much. But hey, he's a grieving guy. Grieving people think stupid things sometimes. Unrealistic expectations for people. But that part, I don't know. It worked. It did work in this movie. I would have loved to have seen more. I would have loved to have seen just the entire movie just based upon that part. I really would have. I thought that would have been great. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. We got a bunch of other things, especially like third act didn't have really much to do with it. The second act was a big part of it, but the second act kind of had a lull moment. There was like no action really in between it, and that really I thought kind of hindered it in a lot of ways. I kept looking at my watch to be like, okay, how many more minutes do we have left in this? As far as the sister, Shang-Chi's sister, I can't even remember her name because she's not really a relatable character in any way. You meet her in this fight scene where she's got this, I don't know, fight club like thing, and that was it. Like, she defeats Shang-Chi, and then she does nothing for the rest of the movie. Nothing. She's just nobody. And I felt like maybe they could have done more with that character. I'm not saying that she has to, the MCU and a lot of films now, they feel like, they always got to take take a female protagonist that really isn't the name of, the show, the big, the big protagonist. But then they usually kind of raise her up to be kind of better than the protagonist. It didn't really work that way in this film. But you can still kind of, you don't have to make them overshadow the protagonist in any way. But you could have added more to her that would have made her be like, okay, she actually did something interesting in this. As far as, the evil entity is concerned in it, that was a real letdown for me in a lot of ways. Another one that I thought would have been really interesting is being Kingsley. I briefly touched on him a little bit in this as Trevor, I think it was Trevor Slattery or something along those lines. He was the Mandarin, of course, in the Iron Man movies, and he's imprisoned. He really has some funny parts. He like Aquafina, actually hit the mark all the way around, almost slightly a little bit better. Totally fit. Totally loved his character. Ben Kingsley is just an amazing actor, anyways. So that just was extra topping, having him in there. But I felt like they could have done what I feel like that they did completely and totally terrible at was like Talo. I know I'm probably butchering that name, but it was a village that Shang-Chi's mother was from. It's this mystical, otherworldly village, and they're kind of like, they've got this secret. They've got this like, crazily powerful entity imprisoned, and they're keeping it safe. Keeping people out where they don't release it. There's that part of it, and I felt like we could have had the whole movie there, and it would have been really cool. We only got to see brief instances of it, and it didn't really. It kind of, to a certain extent, because it was so brief, it felt like it didn't fit in the movie in a lot of ways. It really did. It felt like just like, okay, we're in real world, real world, real world, and then we go to for like 10 minutes this mystical village, and then we're back to real world again. Like, that's the way it felt in a lot of ways. Felt like they could have added more to that, made that a little bit more interesting overall. Another thing, flashbacks. Flashbacks were really bad in this movie, really bad. I felt like they weren't used properly in a lot of ways. There was a flashback that showed Shang-Chi's mother's death. There is a flashback showing the Mandarin basically coming to power, and taking over places with his 10 rings. And there was like some other little flashbacks between Shang-Chi and his sister. None of them worked for me. One, we never really got to see how the Mandarin really acquired the 10 rings in the first place. That could have been something that I felt like was needed, and could have tied into this whole Ta Lo, where he meets his wife, and trying to get there. I felt like that would have been better if there was like more of a tie-in of some of these things. There was literally nothing about it, and that really hurt this. Felt like they could have just completely and totally just done some exposition and just been like, my mother died between, before this movie starts and so forth like that. And I felt like that would have worked in this one instance. But normally I'm like a show me, don't tell me person. But I feel like in this case, there wasn't enough motivation there to really, I don't know, do the whole cutscenes they showed, the beginning of it. I felt like there could have been something, especially when it comes to the mother. I felt like there could have been, you could have taken those scenes out and it would have still worked perfectly. Because I felt no attachment to the mother in the first place, I actually felt more of attachment to the Mandarin and his grieving than I actually did to the actual mother that died. Which is usually kind of the exact opposite. But overall, this movie was good. It was good. Like I said, I would give it like a C plus to B minus, somewhere in between that. After seeing it a couple times, I might give it more of a B minus than I would, a C plus in that regard. Simply because it has potential. It's interesting. I don't know if I'm excited to see another one of them though. I don't know if this is going to be something that people are going to be like, we want to see a Shang-Chi too. Now I know the MCU has been saying that they want another one, to make another one. I don't know if fans are going to feel that way. I really don't. It was good standalone film, but I don't know if we really need another. But then I kind of worry, if we don't have another one, is this movie going to just feel like something that doesn't fit into the whole narrative of Phase 4? Like, I mean, is it going to feel that way in a lot of ways? We'll just have to see. I think we probably know that Shang-Chi is going to be in the new Doctor Strange movie, so I mean that might help this movie out a little bit, and maybe make me, once I see the full thing of it, maybe would make me give it a higher grade. But overall, definitely Would recommend seeing this movie. You know, like I said, it's not going to probably be a box office success by any stretch of the imagination, but it's fun. It's 2 hours that you feel like isn't a waste of time. The second act could have been better. The cutscene, the flashbacks could have been better. And then some of the martial arts in this could have been better. It was just a little bit too like you know, Chinese martial arts that you see in like these spectacular movies, like almost or in games like Dynasty Warriors, something along those lines. That's the way it sometimes felt. That could have been done a little bit better. But besides that, Simu Liu was up to the task of being the main protagonist. Um, the Mandarin was a good antagonist. I enjoyed the son father conflict that was there, and Aquafina, and I felt like Ben Kingsley as Trevor did a great job as comic relief. So overall, yeah, it was a fun watch. It really was a fun watch. I didn't really know what to think of this movie. I mean, the previews of it just didn't look. The trailers of it just didn't look that good. It was better than the trailers. I will say that. So don't let the trailers fool you. The movie is actually better than what we saw. It's not a generic film by any stretch of the imagination. It's pretty good. It's actually a fun watch. But overall, guys, let me know what y'all think. Let me know if y'all loved it, hated it. Let me know. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Y'all take care.